I'm Fonzo.
And I'm Eliza.
And we're the co-host of Grown, a podcast from the Moth that shows we're never fully grown.
Growing up feels like a phase that should end at some point, but does it ever really? Whether you're 16 or 26 or 86, you're going to have to deal with family drama, your body, and the type of person you want to be. So why not put it all out in the open and go through it together?
Join us every other week to deal with cringe, culture, and the courageous efforts of people like you to get grown.
Start listening today. Follow Grown on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now.
Hey, it's Anita. I hope you have been enjoying this podcast. I really, really hope that because we have many more episodes coming this season, and I will tell you more about those later. This is usually the part of the show where I offer a reflection, my thoughts, experiences, and opinions on all the taboo topics Embodied is known for. Well, here's a reflection on the type of show this is and our mission, to take all the shame out of sex, relationships, and personal health. It is really important work to me and the Embodied team. And when we're getting Embodied off the ground, it was only natural to look around for like-minded hosts who get really personal with their guests. That's how I found The Only One in the Room. It's a podcast hosted by Laura Cathcart Robbins. And her podcast origin story begins when she experienced otherness as the only Black person on a writing retreat with 600 people in attendance. On her show, Laura talks to folks who've been in that situation, been the only one of some kind in a space that can feel unwelcoming. So today, I thought I would share one of the coolest recent episodes of The Only One in the Room. The guest is a woman named Amy Bond, who has led a fascinating life. She's a former sex worker who is now an attorney and entrepreneur. She's also been married for 8 years to a guy named Keith, who she says she is deeply in love with. But Amy has been on the receiving end of confused looks or judgmental criticisms when people learn she is someone who has opened her marriage.
Can you tell us about, just briefly, meeting Keith and what you thought of him when you met him?
Okay, so the first time I met Keith, I was actually meeting Keith's friend, whose name is Brian. And it was like 2 days before Christmas in 2009. And Brian had called me and was like, hey, do you want to go see Zombieland? Zombieland's a movie starring Bill Murray, one of the greatest movies ever made. And he said, you want to go to Zombieland with me at Laurelhurst Theater? And I said, yeah, that would be awesome. I go meet Brian, and Brian had brought along his friend Keith. And Keith introduced himself, and I remember distinctly thinking that he looked like a very serious man. Mm-hmm. And so I apologized to him before the movie because I have the loudest laugh, like an obnoxiously loud laugh. And in movie theaters, I commonly have an experience where I'll just be watching the movie and like so into it and so loud. And people in the movie theater will start moving away from me. And by the time the movie's over, there's like this force field around me, people just trying to get away.
Yeah.
And so I told Keith before the movie started, I said, hey, this is a comedy. I have a really loud laugh. I'm probably going to annoy you a lot. And he said, oh, no problem. He's so polite. And then the lights go down, the movie comes on, and within 3 minutes, this guy's screaming, like frantically hilarious, slap your knee. You've never seen anybody laugh at full-bodied a laugh as my now husband does. And I'm sitting right next to him just like, just dying because this movie's so funny. And so it was my first indication that there's a lot more going on there than I thought when I first shook his hand.
Right.
And I like to say we haven't stopped laughing inappropriately since then, and we just, are always laughing.
That's amazing.
So
I love that story.
Love it first laugh.
Yes, love it first laugh. And he kind of outlaughed you, didn't he?
Oh my gosh. I mean, he is a 260-pound man, and he puts his ass into it. Like he doesn't just it's not just his face that laughs, it's like his whole body convulses as he bends forward into it. It's great.
When I have to tell you, as the recipient of your holiday cards, I've seen that ass, and I can imagine him putting it in to his laugh.
We do some weird holiday cards.
Yes,
it's
you
true.
do. They're the best. So wait, how long have you been married?
So May 26th was our anniversary, and we have now been married for 8 years.
Oh, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And, until this year, we were monogamous. And that seemed like, the thing to do. And it also seemed like you only have time for one person. Like, people are a lot of time. Relationships are a lot of time. So it wasn't that we were against dating other people, but just we already didn't have enough time for each other when we're just go, go, go. So, that took a long time to come around to that point.
Right. And we're gonna get there.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your wedding.
So we also, again, we got married in Portland, in the Rhododendron Garden in Portland, Oregon. And that was the year, so this was 2012. I was in my 2L year of law school. And that was the year that Apple did this campaign where they had the 8 different colored iPods, and they were set in a rainbow, and they were on every bus stop sign and every billboard you passed in LA or San Francisco or Boston.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing this rainbow colored iPod display and thinking, oh, that's what I want my bridesmaids to look like in my wedding. And
iPods. Rainbow iPods. I want to hear this.
So rainbows, basically. And my poor bridesmaids put up with me saying, okay, well, I'll get a different colored dress. And I thought, then they can have their own style.
Mm-hmm.
And they all color coordinated so that it didn't look terrible. And so the women's side of the wedding looked like a rainbow. And then the men's side was, black and white suits. It was very cute.
Was it a lot of people?
We didn't have that many people. I have a really big family, and it was mostly my family and men who I had dated in Portland were my guests.
Okay, that is hilarious.
For whatever reason, men I've dated that don't work out tend to just hang around and they're friends. So that's, really actually quite nice. And so my guests were all my friends who I dated, and then my family. And Keith's guests were his family and his close friends. Mm-hmm. And, we both have a lot of acquaintances, but the list of people who are family or akin to family is pretty small. I think we had 60 people there.
Yeah. Was Keith married before?
He was. So he was actually, the night that I met him at Zombieland, he was actually driving down from Seattle to go separate his phone plan from his ex-wife's phone plan.
Oh, wow.
And for whatever reason, that was it was okay, the marriage is finally done.
Yeah.
This is the step that we're taking that tells us that this marriage is officially over.
Interesting.
And he was really sad and, kind of existential. So I invited him over to my house, and we got high and talked about the meaning of life. And that was our first, I guess you could call it a date.
That's kind of dope. That was
great.
You gave him that respite and that place to do that, right?
Yeah, and the only food I had was these popsicles called Skinny Cow popsicles, which is such
I know
a funny
those.
name for a food.
Yeah.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay. So we were we got home from Zombieland, got high, and then we were hungry, and so we ate a box of Skinny Cow popsicles between the two of us.
First date.
I'll never forget. First date.
Yeah.
And one of the very first questions he asked me, he said, "Oh, do you want to have kids?" And I told him that I did. And then he asked me later in the night, why do you want to go to law school? Mm-hmm. And I said, so I can afford to have my kids.
There you go. So tell me what marriage means to you guys.
You know what? I think, there's so many people in the world who tell you that marriage has to be hard and that marriage is difficult and it's peaks and valleys all the way down, baby. And that just has not been my experience. I think that is probably a true story for some people, and that it's a big roller coaster and it goes up and down. And I've certainly had relationships like that, but Keith is not one of them. And for me, our marriage is really firmly founded on a really close friendship. And the ability to laugh with each other and, be there for each other when things are harder, and just always knowing that this one has my back. Yeah. And, I always feel like when I'm spending time with my husband, like it's just playtime. Even last year, we went and we got this trust made. And we're like in the office of like the trust lawyers. We're talking about what we want our wills to look like. And it felt like playtime. Like it was so weird to be in an office in like a suit, and then everyone's wearing a suit. And you've got the notary there to like be a witness. And, Keith wants his ashes thrown off this obscure cliff, and so we were talking about how we'd throw the ashes and how we want there to be parties, and it was just even stuff like that can be so fun if it's with the right person, and Keith is just that right person. And I have to say, I almost feel like I didn't even choose Keith, and I'm not really like a destiny person. I mostly believe that you make your reality, but Keith, he came into my life and fell into my lap, and I did nothing to like make that happen. But as soon as I spent, 2 hours having a conversation with him, I really distinctly remember thinking, oh, and this is my person now. And it was just a matter of fact. It wasn't, oh, I'm going to choose this person. It was and this is my person now.
I understand that feeling. Very much so. And it is quite a freeing realization, or it was for me anyway. It's like, oh, here he is. And sometimes I just look at Scott and I'm like, hey, it's you. It's you sitting there. Like, it's so weird to me that he's still here and that he's still my person, You guys are super cute together, you and Keith. And tell me, before you decided to open your marriage, were either of you interested in having sex with other people? Did you guys ever talk about that?
So we did. Okay, so this is a really funny story, and it's kind of long. Just cut me off if it's too long. Okay, so there was one point in 2018 when Keith was working in Seattle a lot. And he was there like 5 days a week. And he said to me, I get really lonely when I go to Seattle. And I was like, oh, good. So he's going to want to date other people. In my head, that's what I thought. And then his follow-up was...
I'm sorry. I'm stopping you right there. Your first thought was, oh, good. He's going to want to date other people?
Yes.
So tell me why.
Okay, so I feel like this is so controversial, but I feel like the whole monogamy thing and like the ownership of other people is just, I think in 50 years, we're going to look back at that and just be like, how weird. The way that people today kind of think about non-monogamous relationships. And I really think we're setting ourselves up for failure by forcing ourselves to believe in this myth of monogamy. And I think part of the reason I believe that is because, when I was a call girl, I met so many men in hotel rooms who would, do the act of taking off the wedding ring and putting it on the bedstand before they, got their sexy massage,
right,
and then like put it back on. And I think that this is just another way that our society uses shame to keep people stuck in boxes that aren't really real. And so like man and woman, to me, as like genders, feel slightly artificial. And, this belief that there's only one other person for you, I think sets a lot of people up for disappointment later when they start to want other people. And, we're part of a greater animal kingdom and one of the only species that actually practices monogamy. And so it kind of makes you sit back and think, is that like the biological way that we're set up to operate? And it seems to me the answer is no.
Okay.
So, So I would have been cool anyway. And we'd never like explicitly had the conversation about, can we date other people? It just really just hadn't come up. So anyway, Keith says, I've been going to Seattle 5 days a week. I'm getting lonely. And then his follow-up was, I really want you to come with me more often. And I was like, ew, no, I'm not going to Seattle, 5 days a week, just so you're not lonely. Like, get a hobby and like play tennis, I would love it if my husband picked up pole dancing, but
I'm sorry.
I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So I said, what about this? What if we make you a dating profile and you date someone else? And then you just have like a companion or a friend, And his reaction was, oh yeah, that sounds awesome.
So he was quick. He was quick to jump on
He was
that.
straight to it.
Yeah.
And that night we made him a profile. He was like Mr. Web Services because he's like really into web services at his work. And so lo and behold, like all these women reached out to him and we like went through the candidates together, and then he went on a date with one and that went well.
And this was in Seattle.
And this was in Seattle.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's flying up there, and the profile is a Seattle-based profile. So these are women from Seattle who
ladies
who are responding,
yeah.
And Mr. Web Services sounds good to them. So,
yes.
So he went on a date.
Say,
yeah.
I had a lot of pride when like, I don't believe that you own other people, but when like all these women, these like hot, successful, super smart women were like, Mr. Web Services, I was like, oh yeah, that's mine.
That's so funny. Did any of them have any idea that he was married? Is that
yes,
stated?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Okay.
And this is a really interesting thing in online dating because there are some other people, especially in the Pacific Northwest, so San Francisco, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, where it's called ethical non-monogamy, where people who are married have either companions or friends or, fuck buddies on the side who they either date by themselves, which is the most common, or there's the alternative where the couple dates like individual people as a threesome. But that wasn't the vibe I was going for. We wanted to do like, okay, Keith can go date other women and have fun with that.
Right.
And in the process...
Yeah, go ahead.
No, please.
No, I was going to say, did you establish any rules before he went on his first date? Like...
We did not, we should have.
Okay, tell me why.
So we learned that lesson really quickly because one night Keith went on a date, and then I said, okay, 8:30 is a little late to meet someone. He'd already gone on a date with a really nice lady. They had like a 5-course meal together. I was like, oh, you're going on another date? He's like, yeah, we'll be quick. And I said, okay, but 8:30 is kind of late on a Wednesday. Like, go get a cocktail and then go to bed. Mm-hmm. So he calls me the next morning and he's like, oh my God, we had sex. It was awesome. And I was like, what?
Oh, you weren't prepared for that.
And I wasn't, because I thought in my mind, and when I tell this story to women and men, women generally agree with me, but men generally agree with Keith. So it is very evenly split along like traditionally defined gender lines, mm-hmm. whose side of the story people feel more empathetic to. And in my mind, when the sex was going to happen, Keith was going to say, excuse me, I've got to go call my wife, and then call me.
Right.
And in Keith's mind, it was like, no, we already did the part about like, go do whatever you want. Or not whatever you want, but like you can have sex with other people part. And the sex was just a natural extension of the date. And so I was really hurt by that. And we had a conversation about it, and Keith cut off contact with the lady who was great, it sounded like, from his telling of the experience. And we kind of regrouped and put it down. This was like a year and a half ago. And then in January, we went to Sundance together. And this whole time, I've kind of been thinking, someday when I'm not so busy with my businesses, I'm going to probably want to date other people too. And we went to Sundance in January and we're hanging out. And I said, it literally just like occurred to me, like, I think I want to try dating other people. And maybe it was like being out of town or like feeling like I was in a new city. You know that phrase, that's ridiculous phrase, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas?
Yes.
I think there's like that general feeling when you're in new places of just like, oh, I'm in a new place. What if I try a new thing? And I'd never been to Utah before. So I was like, oh, a new place. What can I do in my life that's different, And I said, hey, honey, I think I want to create a dating profile. I think I want to go on a date with a man. And he was like, great. Me too. Let's like make profiles together. So, for like the first day of our vacation at Sundance, we sat on the couch in the chalet, just like making each other's profiles for each other. And it was so much fun. And I realized like how foreign the dating world became to me, because when I was dating, it was like 2009 and the only thing was Match.com. And then you've got Bumble and you've got Tinder and then you've got Grindr. There's just so many of them. And Coffee Meets Bagels is a great one.
I love that name.
And
Coffee Meets Bagels.
Coffee Meets Bagels.
Yes, I love that.
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
It's so good. It's so cute. And so each one of the apps has slightly different rules. And we spent this afternoon in front of a fireplace drinking hot cocoa and like making each other dating profiles and figuring out like, what do we want to say about ourselves and what are our roles this time? And for us, one of our roles is that we do actually say like, I think tonight's the night we're going to like actually move forward. And there's no sex on the first date. Very like, old fashioned of us. And
I'm sorry. That is funny. Okay, go ahead.
So we make each other these profiles, and it's just kind of unfair in dating. Like the men are so much more thirsty than the women. And so on my profile, there's like 7,000, like, hey girl.
Right.
And then on Keith's profile, there's like 4. And he wouldn't mind if I told you that because it's just true. So he's like, wait a minute, how come you got so much more than me? And then he got a little jealous too. And so there's like a little bit of jealousy. And that's the moment when we were like, okay, wait, like, do we actually want to do this? Because I was surprised by my own reaction that first time when 8:30 turned into an overnight thing.
Yeah. And
I didn't think that I was going to be hurt by that, or that it would, if you had asked me in advance, I don't think I would have said that would have bothered me. And so I knew that we wanted to proceed a little bit more cautiously. It wasn't just like, okay, I guess we're having sex with everyone. It was like, okay, how do you feel about this? And like, surprising things would make us feel things, like me having more, thirsty men on my page than him, like brought something up about, feeling inadequate and that kind of thing. So it's been a really interesting kind of journey, but a journey that very abruptly ended because of coronavirus.
Right. So. And I figured that you guys have been quarantined together, which means no dating. I have a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Going back to being married, which from, Scott and I aren't married for a variety of reasons. And one of them, and this is, absolutely my opinion about myself, but not about other people. But for me, the legalities of marriage kind of make it prohibitive. I don't like the idea that it's a legal contract that requires lawyers or for me anyway, it did. It doesn't require lawyers for everybody. And from my understanding, it's a contract of monogamy. Is that what you understand?
I really don't think of it that way, though I do think that it's kind of ingrained in the belief system of what people think about when they think of marriage. And, I'm very open about my life. So when I started talking about this. It was mostly on my Instagram story. I was asking people for advice on my like bio. Be like, does this sound right? You know?
Yeah.
And so many people would respond to me and say like, oh my God, like, are you trying to destroy your marriage? Like one of my friends even said, you know what they say, happy people are always trying to destroy their own happiness. And I was like, what?
I've never heard that, by the way. Never heard that. Anyway, go ahead.
I never thought about whether I actually had heard that before, and I realized you're right. I've never heard that either. I'm like, okay, Tolstoy over here.
Right?
So, you know, I got actually some really interesting pushback from people who I find to be very progressive and people really concerned about, oh, like, are you guys not happy? Like, what happened? And it was like, oh, no, nothing happened. Like, we're great. That's, I think, probably a sign that your marriage is doing quite well, actually, if you trust the other person enough to say, like, we've figured out that this can be a part of our life. And, you know, in the work that I do in family law specifically, I think about a lot of the things I think a lot about the systemic reasons for things like domestic violence. And I think a sense of ownership over another person is one of the ingrained mentalities that makes us feel like we have a right to, say, hit other people or hit the person that we're married to. And in a lot of domestic violence cases, you'll find that the husband will hit his wife, or the wife, in fewer cases, the wife hits the husband, but they don't hit their kids. And that's the line that doesn't get crossed in about 40% of cases. And I think that's really interesting. And I wonder what it says about the social construct of marriage. Like, are we ingraining this idea that your ownership over somebody else gives you the legal right to hurt them if they do something you don't like?
Yeah.
Or manipulate them in a way that you might try to manipulate yourself or feel like it was okay. And I think that ownership part is really scary.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree. I think the ownership part is scary too. And I, again, you know, Scott and I don't subscribe to that. So you mentioned that you're not jealous of each other. He was jealous of how much attention you were getting. But
yeah.
And
he wanted more of it.
He wanted more of it. But you don't have those feelings of jealousy when he goes out on a date, except for that one time when you were blindsided by him having sex.
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't feel jealous. And I actually feel like just like this opens my husband up to interesting human experiences. And because Keith dated more than I did before quarantine started, he's actually been able to continue building the relationship with some of the women he's met through like Zoom. And sometimes I'll be in my office and he'll be on like a date upstairs on like a Saturday afternoon, which is usually when dates happen. I'll kind of like peek my ear out and I can hear him just like laughing hysterically at like this economist's jokes. There's an economist. And I just love it. Like, I get to hear my husband, like, be a slightly different human. I think we're all slightly different in every relationship we're in. And, you know, not different people, but different relationships bring out different qualities in us. And he'll, like, prepare economic jokes. He'll, like, get them queued up before he does a call with them because he wants to make her laugh. And, like, I don't think economist jokes are that funny. So, you know, like, I just love that he can express himself in a new way with different people. And especially for men, I think we've created a culture where it's harder for men to build friendships with one another and like really deep, meaningful friendships with one another. And often men feel more comfortable building those relationships with women. And now he has another resource, you know, another set of ideas that actually like permeate into our marriage.
Well, you know,
and that's really cool.
It is really cool. I'm going through like a filing system frantically in my mind to find something that I can equate this to in my own life. And I definitely do not feel like that with Scott, with other women. But, you know, Scott has this absolute love of surfing in the ocean. And when people would first meet us, there would be kind of an expectation that because we were so connected, that I would automatically need or want to share that with him. And the truth is that I not only don't, like, go to Mexico, go for a week, you know, it does me good to see him enjoying it the way that he does. It nourishes him in a way that I can't. And also what you said, that I don't have the energy to, quite honestly. So in my mind, that's what I'm equating what you're saying to. And that I think that way I can go, okay, I understand. So you're not getting jealous. Are you getting turned on at all by it? Like, do you listen in like a voyeur and think,
I haven't quite gotten there in terms of like physical descriptions of sexual acts. I am much more turned on by connections between minds than I am between physicality for the most part.
You're sapiosexual.
I think that's what they call it, right?
Yeah,
like it's where you're in love with people's minds.
Yes.
And there's a lot of those in Portland, Oregon,
okay.
Which is where I initially like put my dating pool.
Right.
So there's this game. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's called like 36 Questions That Will Make Anyone Fall in Love with You.
No.
And,
I've not heard of this.
Oh my gosh. So whoever is listening, it's like the most important thing ever. Go look it up right now. There's a modern love essay all about it. It's about this set of questions that I think a group of psychologists put together. And they start off with softballs, like, what's your favorite food? And then you both say your favorite food. And then you ask the next question. Tell me about your relationship with your mom is one of them. And these 36 questions culminate in a 4-minute session where you stare into the other person's eyes and you don't do anything except stare into their eyes for 4 minutes. And I've done this before in like group things. And every time I stare into somebody's eyes for 4 minutes, that person stays ingrained in my brain and my like daily experience. I met a woman at a retreat 6 years ago, and I still think about her eyes and the intensity and the waves and curtains of emotions that I watched pass off of her eyes. Like every day, I think about that.
Yeah.
And you could just see, it was almost like you could see all the layers of resistance that and the armor that we put on ourselves every day because the world is hard, just like in little pieces, just fall away. And I think about that woman and I think about the very like depth of her eyes every single day. And that was 4 years ago.
Right.
And so I just think it's amazing that we have all these tools to create deeper human connection with the people around us. And it's just like waiting for us to pick these tools up and go use them.
I actually wanted to circle back again to something you said about trust, was that like you feel like your trust in each other is deeper than in, I don't think you did a comparison, but you were saying that it was evidence of how deep your trust was for each other, that you were able to do this and willing to do this, that this was the next step for you guys. And again,
I don't think that's true for everyone. And I think that has been true for my relationship.
Right. I just wouldn't have thought of it that way. And that makes sense to me too. What one sentence of advice would you have for someone who's looking to open their marriage or thinking about it?
I would just say the one word would be transparency. Say everything, communicate everything. The more uncomfortable it feels to communicate, say it.
Okay.
But that's true for any marriage.
Yeah, it is. It is true for it. But you just have nothing to hide. That's all.
Right.
Right.
Special thanks to Laura Cathcart Robbins, her co-host and producer Scott Slaughter, and the team at Lipstick and Vinyl for sharing this episode of The Only One in the Room with all of us. If you were riveted listening to Amy Bond's interview, let me recommend her first appearance on that podcast. It's all about how she is a former sex worker turned attorney. You can download and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite audio app, like the one you're listening to Embodied on right now. By the way, I promised more Embodied to come. Here's a preview of what you can expect before our first season ends.
Well, I mean, I think if you don't want to have children, that's fine. I think, but, you are here, you're an adult, right? Because someone took care of you. We all began this way, right? And so I think that there's this idea that, we have this, it's, the general lack of nuance in our cultural conversations. We tend to divide around this idea that you either love kids and want them or you hate them, right? Or you're not interested in them at all. They're so inconvenient and disgusting, right?
Where I live is a very small town. We're very harsh about their curiosity and would say a lot of very hurtful things to me, all because they didn't know what this was. They've never experienced someone transitioning or a trans person for that matter.
And I was on Match, and I tried Tinder, and I tried OkCupid. And so, Tinder is the scary one for everybody because they say it's a hookup site. And of course, my friend Judy in Boston, who is in the Northeast, she says, oh my gosh, that's the best one, but it's not a hookup site. But honestly, you put no personal information into Tinder except a photo pretty much. So yeah, it's a hookup site pretty much.
Embodied is a production of North Carolina Public Radio WUNC. I'm Anita Rao on an exploration of our brains, our bodies, and taking on the taboo with you.